Okay, the following is a command of evidence. We want to support or weaken the claim. And this is an if true prompt. So this indicates that if any of the points made in A, B, C, and D are true, you can assume they're true and then decide whether that makes sense or not. Note, this is very different than the same format we see with the quantitative format of these questions with a table or a graph. In those, you want to find the answers that are true or accurate to the graph. You don't assume they're true. You have to check if they're accurate to the graph. And then you want to see if they're relevant to answering the question. So don't assume those are true. So very different between this and that. Even though it's kind of the same format, strengthens, weakens. Let's take a look. This is a pretty straightforward example. Given the stars and planets initially form from the same gas and dust and space, so the same things, stars and planets, some astronomers have posited host stars such as the sun and their planets, such as those in our solar system, are composed of the same materials, with the planets containing equal or smaller. So planets have to have less than or equal to the amount of materials. This idea is also supported by evidence that planets in our solar system are composed of some of the same materials as the sun. Okay, so which finding, if true, would weaken? So in this case, we want to weaken. We want to have some idea that goes against the argument. So against the argument would be not the same materials, or perhaps greater amount of the materials in the planets, because the planets are supposed to have equal or smaller amounts. So let's try to find one of those options among the answer choices. The correct answer here is C. Evidence emerges that the amount of iron in some rocky planets is considerably higher than the amount in the host star. So if the amount of iron is greater, it should be equal to or smaller. But it's not. It's actually higher than the amount. That weakens the claim. That will be our answer. Here is another command of evidence with the if true condition in the prompt. And by the way, it's also weaken. We want to weaken the hypothesis like our first example. This one's going to be a little trickier. Let's dig into it. A student performs an experiment testing her hypothesis. So here we have the hypothesis. A slightly acidic soil environment is more beneficial for the growth of this plant, that they call choice sum, than a neutral soil environment. So she sets up an acidic example with coffee grounds. They're highly acidic. Okay, so one's an acid case, and then we have a control case without the coffee grounds. That's our control. Okay, so her hypothesis would expect more growth in the coffee ground case and less in the non-coffee ground case. We're going to weaken the argument. So we want to find the answer that shows less benefit to growth from the coffee case. Okay, so as we read here through the different answers, which we can all presume are true as we consider whether they weaken the hypothesis or not, we find a couple different nuances. We find the first one talks about significantly taller. The second one talks about significantly weighing less or more. The third option talks about later or earlier in time. The fourth option talks about the fewer the number of seeds, or the sum of seeds that sprout. So wait a second. Pretty clear it's not later or not later in time, the issue, but what actually is beneficial for growth? Does that mean taller, weighing more, or more seeds growing? Either of these three could possibly represent beneficial or greater growth for the plant, which is problematic. How do we decide? If they're all going the same way and weakening the hypothesis in direction, how do we choose? Simple answer is we couldn't. We wouldn't be able to. Fortunately, in these cases, we're going to find that only one of them matches the logical direction. In this case, A. The choice sum plant in the soil without coffee grounds grew taller. So without coffee grounds, the control case was better, which is against the hypothesis. This weakens. We'll find the other two. Strengthen. Choice sum in the soil without coffee grounds weighed less. Well, that makes sense to the hypothesis. That strengthens the hypothesis. Significantly fewer are the choice sum seeds planted in soil without coffee grounds planted. So again, without coffee seeds, fewer grew, which again strengthens the hypothesis. So if you're sitting there wondering, oh my goodness, which of these represents beneficial for growth, you probably can't decide, but 2 out of the 3 we're going in the wrong direction logically. So therefore we know the correct answer.